From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. And ahead today from the Livestock Marketing Information Center, Jim Robb will cover the cattle market scene with us. He'll look at the possibility that cattle prices may be near their low ebb for the season, and he'll talk about the latest USDA cattle on feed report. Then K-State's Gregg Hanzlicek will look at a number of herd health management priorities for you cow-calf producers to consider as summer gives way to fall, including monitoring and maintaining cow nutritional condition and being aware of the possibility of summer pneumonia in calves. And Sarah Moyer has this week's 4-H segment. She'll talk with K-State's Deryl Waldren about the upcoming 2017 Kansas 4-H Dog Project Conference. Plus more ahead on this Agriculture Today.
Have you ever thought about where your food comes from? If you're thinking the grocery store, think again. Facts show that the American farmer feeds more than 129 people.
They are continually increasing and improving their operations. A wide variety of crops and livestock are grown in Kansas as well as the United States, providing food to your dinner plate.
Next time you see a farmer or rancher, thank them. For more information, contact K-State Research and Extension.
Welcome to Agriculture Today. As always, we're glad to have you along. First off, we'll take a look at the cattle market trends of late, and we turn now to the director of the Livestock Marketing Information Center to remind you that is a project co-sponsored by K-State and numerous other land-grant universities. Our pleasure once again to visit with Jim Robb. Jim, on the fed cattle market, the cash trade is still trying to find a floor. Last week, it failed to do so, unfortunately.
Yes, Eric, it continues to follow the general trend of the wholesale beef market. Fed cattle in most markets were down $2 to $2.50 per hundredweight, and the choice beef cutout fell rather dramatically for the week, about $4.75 per hundredweight. So, the meat market and spilling over into the fed cattle market on the cash side has been still a bit of a struggle, although the futures market was kind of steady last week, and so they didn't participate in some of the continued unraveling that has happened on the cash market side and in the wholesale beef market.
Would that be to say then that the futures trade anticipates that the slump may have an end here relatively soon?
Well, it's always hard to tell, Eric, and last year we were about similar price levels, then we got a real unraveling in the futures market and the cash market from about this point lower into November. I don't think the futures market's really anticipating that this time, so I think that's a little bit of good news, although a year ago wasn't anticipated either. But it looks like from a futures market standpoint and a little bit of the undercurrents in the cash market that there is an attempt to stabilize this week. The wholesale beef market lost most of its momentum early in the week and then is going to wait and see. All the meat buying for Labor Day is really behind us, and I think the meat market and the fed cattle market is kind of marking time in a sense to see how we come out here in early September.
As we look historically at retail beef demand here in the U.S., do we see something of a rebound at the summer's end, or will this eventually turn to a rather gradual further decline?
Well, we tend to see a little bit of a strengthening as we get it usually into late August into September, depending on how the weather profile is, et cetera, although it's always hard to call. What we have maybe a little bit unique this year has been really more featuring by the retail sector, and that probably is giving us a little more hope than we've had in the last few years, where the retailer has really been willing to cut their margins and use the meat case to bring people into the grocery stores. And that probably is still in play, and that could work to it's not really a demand component, but that competition for market share has been a plus here from a beef industry perspective, and that could continue here as we get closer into the fourth quarter. And there's just an enormous amount of competition, and especially between the mid-size store, traditional grocery store format.
That competition is a plus for the beef complex, no question about it, you're saying.
I think it is. It's not really consumer demand, but if we look at our estimated margins at the retail level, they're definitely much lower than a year ago, and much lower than they have been in recent years. And those margins tend to underestimate when you have a lot of featuring and a lot of buy one, get one free products being offered, et cetera. The consumer notices that, and that's the type of environment we've had much of this year, and that's really in contrast to the last 3 or 4 or 5 years.
While we're on demand, anything of note on the beef export side of late?
Well, the beef exports seem to have held up rather well. I think the initial industry concern about the safeguard being applied in Japan doesn't seem to have been a big factor. The value of the dollar has continued to erode, which has compensated there some. But the export profile seems to be holding together, and I think the initial scare of the Japanese situation, it's a negative, but maybe not quite as negative as we first maybe thought it would be.
Jim, we do want to address the USDA's monthly cattle on feed report, which was released last Friday afternoon. In just a second, something of a sidebar, just to explore this a bit. A major storm hitting Texas Friday and into the weekend, Hurricane Harvey, torrential rains. Again, it's early to make any clear determination, but what's the anticipated impact, if any, on the cattle sector?
Well, the cattle sector, the grasslands have been pretty good shape down in that country. Never hurts to get rain, although too much can be a problem. There's really only one major packing plant in the sort of major hurricane zone, and that's the cane plant in Corpus Christi. And that plant shut down late last week in anticipation of this. So, most of the packing capacity is as you move further into the Texas Panhandle, into Kansas, obviously. And so I don't think there'll be much disruption in the processing side of the industry, except for that one plant that is based in Corpus Christi.
But we wouldn't want to discount any cattle losses that may occur once the totals are brought together.
I think that's right, Eric. Anytime you start talking about feet of precipitation, right, there's always a risk that some things can go terribly wrong for individual producers especially.
We hope the impact has been somewhat minimal in that respect as well. Well, that cattle on feed report from the USDA out Friday, the numbers were not quite as anticipated on the placement side in particular.
I think that, compared to the pre-report estimates, the placement's up slightly over 6% year over year. The number comes in basically 3% above a year ago, and marketings came in 4% above a year ago. Marketing's a little bit lighter than anticipated, but well within the range. But as you mentioned, Eric, the surprise was on the placement side. We saw an increase in placements as anticipated in Nebraska, but it was only about 10,000 head in the lightweight category. So some of the northern plains drought didn't seem to fully kick in. But largely the number is within the range of estimates. We had a very large range on placements. This is a month that's hard to figure out. Normally, placements, they increase between June and July, and this year they declined. The last time that happened was 2007. So it looks like we pulled some of these cattle early into feed yards, and that seems to be what's happened, and maybe the pushing of animals in the northern plains drought into feedlots is still ahead of us rather than occurring in the July placement data. So overall, the report is kind of neutral, but I think it does add up, reasonably well when we look at the numbers overall.
It is interesting. In the previous monthly cattle on feed report, which was posted in late July, placements were far exceeding expectations. Now we see them coming up short of expectations on the average. So is that indicative of anything?
Well, I think that's part of the nature of, this is a biological and grass-based industry. Yeah. And oftentimes these things, when we move animals earlier or later because of Mother Nature or the marketing patterns, they tend to even out a little bit. And I think largely this is an evening out from the large placements in recent months and kind of balancing out that ledger a little bit, Eric.
All right. But for the long pull, this may bode well for the markets because it appears that currentness is the tone of the markets at the feed yards?
The feed yards are still very current. We've had excellent cattle feeding weather in the bulk of the high plains. So these cattle have performed extremely well. We still have weights slightly below a year ago, but, the very good animal performance, we've marketed cattle aggressively. And I think when we stand back and look at the big picture here, cold storage report came out this past week, and it showed that, we're moving the product through the system. Cold storage overall was down for beef, pork, and chicken compared to a year ago. So we're being current in feedlots, and in the broader market sense, the cold storage report showed frozen stocks are not building up. In fact, they're declining year over year. So that is a positive note for the industry.
And by the way, listeners, we will run through the Kansas numbers from that cattle on feed report in just a couple of moments here. So, Jim, heading into this trading week, what's likely to occur? Again, the hope is that the fed cattle trade will, in fact, bottom out as soon as possible.
And we're right in that, probably the time frame of this, trying to find a bottom, at least for the near term in the fed cattle market, Eric. There's a lot of market analysts saying that there's more cattle ahead to be marketed in October and November, and it really turns on how we continue to market cattle over the next 30 days or so. So the marketing rate stays up. We don't need to necessarily plan for last year's very low prices in October and November last year, where we took the fed cattle well below $1 per pound or $100 per hundredweight. We're not anticipating that this year, but there always are risks in the marketplace. But I think your overall sense is correct. The market at this point seems to be trying to find a bottom here late in the summer quarter.
Very well. Thanks for your comments. As always, Jim, we will catch up with you again soon. Appreciate it.
It's been my pleasure, Eric.
The director of the Livestock Marketing Information Center based in Denver. That's Jim Robb with this week's analysis of the cattle trading trends. And before we head into the break here, now the Kansas numbers from that USDA cattle on feed report out last Friday. As of August the 1st, there were 2.18 million cattle on feed in the state. Placements at 430,000 head, down 3% from last year, and the marketings for the month of July totaling 430,000 head as well, up 15% from a year ago. That was Kansas' share of the USDA's cattle on feed report this time around. You're listening to Agriculture Today. Now this break. When we come back, we'll visit with a K-State veterinarian about several herd health management considerations for you cow-calf producers to keep well in mind as we transition from summer into fall now. That's coming up here on the K-State Radio Network.
Eat today? Thank a farmer. A way to get more involved in agriculture is through 4-H and FFA. Through 4-H and FFA, we have been given multiple opportunities to grow as leaders and learn more about agriculture.
You can learn skills related to jobs, public speaking skills, and you get the opportunity to travel around the country and meet new people.
If you want more information about getting more involved in 4-H and FFA, visit them on their websites at kansasffa.org and kansas4h.org.
Agriculture Today returns now as we get into cattle health management going into the fall season. And Mike Seid, once again from the Veterinary Diagnostic Laboratory here at K-State, is the director of the Production Animal Field Investigations Unit with that laboratory. Gregg Hanzlicek. What we have here today, Greg, is more or less a grab bag of things that cow-calf producers need to have well in mind in managing the health of their herds heading into fall. And you would like producers to start out by considering the condition their cows are in at the moment, and we're talking about body scores here.
That's exactly right. I do a lot of traveling around the state, and for most of the state, the condition that these cows are in on pasture is exactly the condition that they need to be in when we calve in the spring. And so if producers go out there, take pictures, look, and just notice that they're in proper condition. And so our goal from now on out is to maintain that body condition score until we get into the early spring.
And the challenge here is that as we push on further into the fall, the quality of that grass starts to diminish.
That's exactly right. The pastures, at least the ones I've looked at, are still green, and the cows are in good condition, so supplements are probably not needed. But as we move further into September, October, those grasses will start to become brown and dormant, and the protein level is going to drop in those. And so that's the time that when we need to start thinking about a a protein supplement for those cows that are still out on pasture.
What can a producer then assess to determine those protein needs as they change?
Well, when I was in vet school, I was taught that as a veterinarian you needed to be a manure connoisseur. So, and producers know what cow patties look like with cows on pasture, right? They're thin, they're green, they're spread out. As we move into that dormant season, those manure pats will start to actually firm up. They'll be taller. And if producers start seeing that, then the number one thing they need to think of is that maybe we're shorting that rumen of protein. And so I strongly recommend they look at body condition, but they also look at the consistency of the manure of those cows on pasture.
So a producer comes to the conclusion that maybe a boost of protein is in order. What sort of supplement would be the best to employ, at least as this transition from summer to fall takes place?
Well, that's a great question. And I'm just going to say that the cows are in good condition, so all we need to do is maintain. We're going into the dormant grass. Then probably what a producer should pick is a protein supplement that has at least 32% protein. Mm-hmm. If we get lower protein, that means higher energy, and those cows probably don't need the energy as much as they need the protein at that time.
And presentation each day or periodically, what?
Well, research is pretty clear that with that high of a protein supplement, you can actually go up to feeding it once a week. We recommend that it probably should be fed every few days in a solid form, a dry form. No producers use tubs and liquids and things. And the only thing I want to say about that is that those products are typically more expensive, but the variation difference in the intakes in tubs and liquid is a lot higher than it is in a dry formulation like a range cube or a cake. And so they can use them, but just realize that some cows are going to eat a lot of that product, and some of those cows are not going to touch it at all, so there's a lot of variation there.
But again, a 32% protein product, and how much provided per day? What guidelines can a producer go by there?
We just say let's start with a pound and a half. At a low level, go a month, reassess body condition, manure consistency, and then adjust accordingly. If a producer gets behind and it's low body condition, then it's going to take a different type of supplement, and it's going to take a very large amount to get those cows into proper calving condition. So the key is to keep them where they are today.
It is difficult to catch up. We've learned that in the past.
It is very difficult.
So start checking the body condition of your cows, and you say do this monthly right up to calving time this late winter, early spring.
I like to do it monthly. Some people go longer, but I think monthly gives us a pretty good idea. And again, recommend that producers take pictures of those cows every month, because if they're looking at those animals all the time, they're not going to notice a change. Right. But they can show the pictures to somebody, or they can just look at the pictures themselves and say, these cows are either maintaining, they're slipping in weight, or whatever.
All right. As far as disease concerns go, well, we're going to bring up this condition that's still very much a worry out there, Gregg. That's anaplasmosis that might turn up in the beef breeding herd. And there is the tendency for this to pick up some in the fall, you say.
Yes, we see anaplasmosis all year round, but this is peak from the end of August through September, maybe into October, because of the incubation period and those kind of things. This is when most of the cases we're going to see, at least in the Midwest.
And to remind, it's a blood-borne disease. It causes all kinds of problems, potentially losing animals, potentially aborting calves, and behavioral changes would be the main indicator, right?
Absolutely. And really the primary sign is that there's one or more adults found dead in the pasture. And anytime, as far as I'm concerned, anytime a producer finds that, probably should have a veterinary necropsy to make sure that find out what the disease is. But that's a lot of times the way anaplasmosis presents. You can also, they might be open mouth breathing, so they look like they have pneumonia. Just like you mentioned, some of those cows will become very, very agitated. They're dangerous to be around. And again, to remind producers that you're not going to see the clinical signs in the calves with anaplasmosis. It's going to be those cows typically 3 years of age and older.
And you don't want that to get out of hand quickly. So if there's any suggestion whatsoever that anaplas is within the herd, they need to call their veterinarian pronto?
Absolutely. And I'd say if you're in the eastern two-thirds of Kansas, that there's a good chance that at least your herd has been exposed to anaplasmosis. And for the next month to 6 weeks, it's probably a good idea to check those cows or those herds at least a couple times a week, because if you do have an outbreak, there's some really good treatments out there if you catch the disease early.
That's the key, to get on top of it as soon as possible. Here's another herd health consideration that's more or less come on in recent years. It's called summer pneumonia. This is strictly in the calves now, and is it out and about as well?
It is, and again, this is when we start seeing it. It will be September, October, just before weaning, or maybe just after weaning when people are doing fence line weaning and those kind of things. But it's a maddening disease because we diagnose it with either corona or BRSV viruses. There's not a whole lot we can do with viruses, but typically the presentation is the producer will go out there and have a large percentage of calves that have pneumonia this time of year in pasture, which is pretty strange. The adults won't be affected, but the calves are. Again, if the producers see this problem, then it's important that they call their veterinarian and get a proper diagnosis, because there's other things that can also present like this.
The fortunate part of this condition, if there is one, is that it typically doesn't cause a lot of calf deaths. Is that right?
That's a great point that I forgot. Yeah, typically a high percentage of calves will be sick, but a very low percentage of those will actually die from the virus. You just got to let it run its course, and we're talking 7 to 10 to 14 days, so what we recommend.
It'll certainly hamper performance of those calves, so that's the main thing, and you want to know exactly what it is before you move any further on that.
Absolutely.
So do get in touch with your veterinarian if you suspect that summer pneumonia has taken hold in the calf herd. Now, the value of preconditioning programs as we head up to weaning time. Some producers will be selling calves right after weaning, perhaps. Others won't. But preconditioning is a practice that has shown its worth, Gregg.
It has. There's been lots of studies to show that whether producers sell on video auctions or other auctions, typically if they good vaccination program with perfect timing, they'll net some income from actually using a preconditioning program.
And that would include a vaccine protocol to promote the health of those calves. What generally should be included in that protocol?
Well, that's a great question, and there's probably 50 different preconditioning definitions and programs out there, but I guess for me the simplest one, because some producers will not be able to hold those calves after weaning and those kind of things, that for me the simple program is let's just get a good vaccination program going for those calves prior to weaning. And for me that means 2 to 4 weeks before the desired weaning time, let's get a good modified live or any product basically that includes all the respiratory diseases. And then also the 7-way Clostridioms, the blackleg, let's get those vaccines in those calves. And then we always need to booster those, so it's good to booster those on the day of weaning.
This will be a good basis of vaccine treatment then.
Absolutely. It'll set those calves up, stimulate their immune system, protect them against the post-weaning bovine respiratory disease. And the products that producers use, again, strongly recommend they use their veterinarian's guidance. Vaccines work differently, effectively in different geographical areas, so it's important they use their judgment and their expertise on what products to use.
Very good. And this is on the marketing side. You'd recommend that producers be in contact with their selling point for those calves in as far as that preconditioned protocol and what's going to be suitable for sale.
Yeah, absolutely. There's sales that are called preconditioning sales, but they have stringent requirements on what products that need to be used, the timing on when those calves have to be given those products. So if a producer thinks that they're going to sell their calves in a special calf sale like that, it's important to get a hold of the people and say, what exactly do we need to do to have our calves sell in that sale?
That's a good assortment of things that the cow-calf producer ought to have in mind as they think about herd health management heading into this fall season, which is, in fact, right on our doorstep now, Gregg. Thanks for coming over.
Thank you.
Gregg Hanzlicek. He's from the Veterinary Diagnostic Laboratory at K-State's College of Veterinary Medicine. He joins us regularly to talk cattle health management here on Agriculture Today.
Have you ever wondered why livestock producers burn Kansas pasture? Here's the deal. Controlled burning helps preserve the prairie and allows every bite feeder cattle eat to be the most nutritious. National Wildlife and Parks also feel it is a necessity to help with wildlife populations.
So the next time you see a Kansas pasture burning, know it's for the good of our wildlife, our prairie, and our livestock. This message was brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
Agriculture Today continues here on the K-State Radio Network, now with this look at today's agricultural news headlines for you. These courtesy in part of DTN. Well, widespread, heavy, and likely record rainfall from Tropical Storm Harvey has inundated southeastern Texas. Rain forecast to continue through almost the entire upcoming week. Rainfall totals, as measured by NOAA observation stations, are so great that they are off the National Weather Service scale. That, according to Texas Tech University climate scientist Catherine Hayhoe. Harvey is expected to produce an additional rain accumulation of 15 to 25 inches over the middle and upper Texas coast through Thursday, and isolated storm totals may reach around 40 inches, some locations in that area. Southeast Texas agriculture has extensive damage in store from the impact of Harvey-related rain. However, quantifying that will take some time, according to Texas A&M AgriLife Communications Specialist Kathleen Phillips. She notes their county agents with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension will be in the fields as soon as they can be, and that agency will be managing some animal supply points. Many of those animal supply points are set up and operating, hopefully to provide a one-stop place for all to call instead of having to wonder where to call, as she put it. In addition to human and livestock safety threats, rainfall from Harvey posing a significant threat to cotton still in the fields in southeastern Texas. Our thoughts and prayers to those folks as that story continues to unfold to our south. The U.S. and global economies are stronger, but the sluggish farm economy is starting to draw a little more attention from the Federal Reserve. An assistant vice president of the Fed's Bank of Kansas City, its Omaha branch, Nathan Kaufman, said he will address the Federal Reserve Board of Governors next week to talk about the challenges and risks in the farm sector right now. Crop prices have been consistently low over the last 4 years, but also, he notes, relatively stable. The USDA's last forecast showed national net farm income at roughly half of 2013 totals. The USDA will update those forecasts at the end of the month. Kaufman said he thinks global demand is strong. It's not the strength of demand that we've seen in the past, he says, but it is strong. While hitting individual farms hard, the agricultural downturn has been gradual overall, says Kaufman, in terms of financial stress for farmers and agribusinesses. He says that's probably an oversimplification to say it's been gradual, because clearly there are operations dealing with things that have been much more difficult. Most lenders, he says, have had at least a few loans this year in which producers had to make some changes to the operation to get a line of credit. Kaufman says lenders are still seeing a lot of carryover debt, and areas with more average to smaller-sized crops this fall will have more stressed producers financially. A saving grace right now, he says, is that farmland values have not fallen as dramatically as expected. Kaufman notes that in the first quarter of 2017, land values fell 8% here in the state of Kansas. That aspect of land values, he says he would argue, is very much still something to watch. And a farmer from Alton, Kansas, Harold Lonsinger, has now given a gift of land to the Kansas State University Foundation to establish the Harold and Olympia Lonsinger Sustainable Research Farm. He has given 2,300 acres of Osborne County farmland to the university to develop a research farm focusing on sustainable agricultural practices and soil conservation, reclamation, and protection. Lonsinger joined the U.S. Army after graduating from high school, serving in the Pacific Theater during World War II, later serving in a non-combat role in Korea. Then he enrolled at K-State and earning his degree in mechanical engineering in 1956. His wife, Olympia, and he lived in Hutchinson. He worked as an engineer for Doscossil Food Service, and he retired in 1984, then moving to Cocker City to farm and raise livestock. He stressed his goal of donating this land is to learn how to best restore the soil to its historic quality. Much of the Lonsinger land is contiguous and will allow researchers to discover how historical and innovative farming practices impact larger tracts of soil over time. Incidentally, there will be a formal dedication of the Harold and Olympia Lonsinger Sustainability Research Farm near Osborne on Wednesday, September the 20th. On now we go to this week's edition of Tree Tales. Standing by with that, K-State forester Bob Atchison. Bob?
Oak hickory forests make up 57% of Kansas woodlands, about 1.3 million acres. Their fruit, known as acorns, or mast, are an important food source for white-tailed deer, turkey, squirrels, and wood ducks. Woodland owners managing for wildlife have the ability to increase acorn production for their wildlife by following a few simple guidelines. Acorn production varies tremendously from one tree to the next and from year to year, making it extremely hard to predict. For this reason, it is important for landowners to record the acorn production of specific trees in their woodlands over a 5-year period. Mid to late August is the best time to look for good acorn-producing trees before insects and predators disturb them, and binoculars can be an extremely helpful tool. Good acorn crops occur 1 out of every 3 to 4 years, so look for trees that produce good crops in these off years and mark them. Retaining a mixture of red and white oaks in a 2-to-1 ratio, that is, 2 red oaks to every white oak, will avoid total mass failure in those years when acorn production is low. If wildlife is an important objective for your woodlands, oaks should make up about 50 to 60% of the total species composition. The diameter and age of oaks is also important to consider in selecting good acorn-producing trees. Most oaks will not produce many acorns until they're 30 years old. Red oaks maximize acorn production around 20 inches in diameter at breast height. White oaks, on the other hand, reach maximum acorn production at about 26 inches. Once good acorn-producing trees have been identified, their crowns and canopies should be released on all 4 sides from the adjacent competing trees. This allows the tree canopy to receive full sunlight, which is critical for good acorn production. For more information about managing your woodlands, contact the Kansas Forest Service at 785-532-3300 or check us out on the web at www.kansasforest.org. This is Bob Atchison with the Kansas Forest Service at Kansas State University, encouraging you to value and manage the woodlands on your property. You've been listening to another Tree Tale.
Thanks, Bob. Well, Sarah Moyer takes over with this week's Kansas 4-H segment, next on Agriculture Today.
Hamburgers, roast, ribs, steak, or whatever you prefer. Beef, it's what's for dinner. Kansas cattle farmers produce 7.5 million head of cattle per year. It takes about 7 tablespoons of peanut butter to get the same amount of protein in 1 serving of lean beef. Support your local Kansas farmers and ranchers. Eat beef. This message was brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
Welcome on to Agriculture Today. I'm Sarah Moyer, and it's time for our weekly 4-H update, and this time we'll be speaking about the 2017 Dog Conference and Quiz Bowl. Here with us to help run over the events program and what will be expected, we have Kansas 4-H Youth Development Specialist Deryl Waldren. Good to have you on, Deryl.
Thanks, Sarah.
What should 4-Hers who are looking into it be considering getting ready for the next year?
Yes, the Kansas 4-H Dog Conference and Quiz Bowl has been going on for at least 30 years, and it's an event held out at Rock Springs 4-H Center, and this year it will be with one night stay out at Rock Springs. And it's a great event for 4-H members to attend with parents or grandparents or perhaps a volunteer 4-H leader or even extension staff. They have a chance to have some quality family time together. What makes it a little bit different than a lot of conferences is this one they're allowed to bring a dog, their dog in the 4-H project, to this conference, and that helps the dog with socialization skills because some dogs need to be around people, and it's a way for them to actually bring their dog to this conference. Normally, Rock Springs doesn't allow dogs on the campus, but this one we've got permission for that. So it's a wonderful weekend where they have a chance for workshops, and I'll cover those in a little bit, what things we're offering this year, as well as we have a Quiz Bowl competition on Sunday morning.
And this is an event that is open to all ages of 4-H members, correct?
That is correct. This one doesn't have it can be for 4-H members 7 and up, along with parents or grandparents. Extension staff and volunteers are invited to attend.
So a unique statewide opportunity for 4-H'ers and their dogs. And we mentioned the program. Let's go ahead and dig into some of the classes that will be going on during this dog conference.
Yes, this year we're doing a little bit different. We're going to have a Track 1 and a Track 2. And so members and participants will need to sign up for Track 1 or Track 2. However, adults are only eligible for Track 1. And those 5 workshops that we're offering in Track 1, I'll go down through them and then give the particulars on them. We're going to be having a freestyle dog dancing with Anna Budish, obedience training classes with Rachel Weddle and Emily Wright, a leather dog collar workshop with Jill Martinson, Carrie Van Winkle, and Karen Van Winkle, creepy crawlies that can hurt your dog with by Lynn Mork, who's a veterinarian, and Canine Good Citizen program with testing and details. So of those 5 offered, participants will be able to pick 3 of the 5, and they're an hour workshop on Saturday afternoon, so they'll go to 3 different workshops. That's that particular option. Then we also are going to offer, for the first time, at least in a while, is the Track 2. Sign-up is required for Track 2. It's open to 4-H members with a current dog, and they're ready to advance onto more advanced obedience training. So they'll be able to bring their dog with a 4-H member and get some advanced obedience training for graduate novice, Open A, Open B, Utility A, and Utility B. So if you sign up for Track 2, then you can't take part in Track 1 classes because you'll need to devote the 3 hours to this Track 2. So it's a unique option. Beginners may go for the Track 1, and more advanced kids may go for the Track 2 with their dogs.
There are also contests wrapped up in the dog conference. Aside from these educational classes, what are those like?
Well, on Sunday morning we'll have the Quiz Bowl, which will have teams of 4 who then get asked questions, and they're in a competition, and we'll have a compete off. The winning team advances in a bracket, and eventually we'll have the top team for junior and senior. And then also the juniors, the younger ones, 7 to 10, can kind of go in a practice Quiz Bowl where they learn how the process works, how the equipment works, and they have some fun questions to really learn and hopefully then merge later into the actual Quiz Bowl competition. And there's lots of educational dog materials set out where they can do some hands-on looking at various parts of the dog, and other educational materials would help increase their knowledge of the dog project. And in the evening, we'll have a Minute to 4-H contest and a dogopoly hunt outside where they get to go on an excursion. Plus, in the evening, they'll be able to go to a campfire and make s'mores and do other things. And they'll be housed in the cottages by county groups. Then they'll have 3 meals out there and some breaks, and it's just a fun overall weekend package in about 24 hours.
Terrific. And what are the costs for this event?
The costs this year are $110 for full-time participants. And then some people do participate just on Saturday, and that cost is $65. And others may participate only on Sunday, and that cost is $45. And we're using the C-Event registration system on the Kansas 4-H website. So you go into the homepage of www.kansas4-h.org and click on the left navigation bar. There'll be upcoming registrations, and you can click on that, and it'll take you into Dog Conference, and you can register there. Then also on the website will be the full details that they can click on that under What's Hot. We're looking forward to having a great number of members, leaders, parents, grandparents, and extension staff at this conference on October 21st and 22nd. And if they have more questions, they should contact me, Deryl Waldren, at 785-462-6281. And my email is dwaldren@ksu.edu, so that's DWALDREN@ksu.edu.
Thank you, Deryl, for coming on and speaking with us about this conference.
My pleasure, Sarah.
Sounds like an exciting event. And once again, that was Kansas 4-H Youth Development Specialist Deryl Waldren. He is also the coordinator for the 2017 Dog Conference and Quiz Bowl. This year's theme, Dogs Are Game, and that will be taking place October 21st and 22nd at the Rock Springs 4-H Center near Junction City. And the registration deadline for the conference is October 8th at midnight, so go ahead and Mark that on your calendar and make a decision before then on whether or not to attend this exciting conference. Once again, the website to access more information is kansas4h.org. And speaking of Rock Springs, the 4-H Center is welcoming 4-Hers to come for a fall cleanup in conjunction with the 48 Hours of 4-H project. This year's 48 Hours of 4-H weekend is the first full weekend in October, and this fall cleanup taking place on October 7th. Lunch will be provided for volunteers who come and donate their time. To register a club or to participate, visit rocksprings.net. That's rocksprings.net. You can also call about lodging options at the 4-H Center at 785-257-3221. This is another great opportunity for 4-Hers to give back to their community and the 4-H Center that supports the Dog Conference and other events. And that's all the time we have for today. This has been your 4-H segment. Thank you for tuning in. For Eric Atkinson, I'm Sarah Moyer, and you've been listening to Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.